Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross. Jim, how are you, man?
I'm good. I'm good, Connie. Everything's good. I'm in Oklahoma. Some might be able to detect. Got here last night, coming out of where were we? Detroit.
Detroit? Yeah.
Nice crowd in Detroit. Good, about 7,000 people, which is good for us. So it was a nice TV. Airs Saturday night. That's next week, though, right?
That's this past Saturday. Yeah, this past Saturday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're as we record this, it's Friday.
Right.
So, and I just got through. I never heard so many tornado sirens in my life until last night. It was amazing. I bet we had 10 or 15 tornado warnings. The damn siren seemingly never stopped, but we dodged the bad parts and we're good. So no damage that I hear at my place anyway, and so that worked out real well. I'm happy that we dodged that fucking bullet. So anyway, everything else is good though, man. You know, we're still plugging along, keeping an eye, a anxious eye on the ticket sales for the UK.
For sure.
Like I mentioned, we had a real good house in
Detroit.
Detroit. So everything seems to be perking along pretty well, Connie.
Well, man, I'm excited for you guys. It seems like every time you turn around, there's more great news. Of course, you heard Tony's big announcement this past Wednesday, and of course, that is the buzz of all of wrestling. And of course, we're still on our march for Double or Nothing. It's going to be here before you know it at the end of the month. Tickets are still on sale, AEWTIX.com. That's AEWTIX.com. And of course, you don't want to miss the voice of wrestling, by God, each and every Friday on Rampage. So be sure to check him out when he's coming to your town. And man, I got to talk about the response we got from last week's episode.
Yeah.
I was over the moon with last week's show just because it was so different than what we normally do. You know, we normally talk about the ins and outs of what was going on in the business of professional wrestling over the last, 30 years or so. But we went way back to the 70s where it all started for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to just tell some stories. And some of those stories were kind of dark. We called the episode in hindsight The Dark Side of Mid-South. That wasn't exactly the original idea, but man, the overwhelming feedback, that's all I saw. What'd you see?
Yeah, it was good. A lot of feedback. Hopefully it translates into a lot of views and maybe some new viewers. So hopefully, and you check us out on YouTube. That's important.
Absolutely.
But I was very impressed what we did last week. It was a good show, and as you said, it didn't start off that way. It didn't start off. This is what we're going to do today.
Right.
We had no script. We just we spitballed it, as they say, and landed on some very controversial topics that were all true, many sad, and you wonder how in the hell a business could thrive if it really did thrive. I don't know if it thrived or not, but it was just it's hard to predict what that show was going to be like. But once we got into it, it seemed to flow like a son of a gun. So all good. I was really pleased. Thanks. I want to thank all the folks for watching and listening. So that was kind of cool.
Super cool. We're going to pick it up where we left off next month. But today we're going back 20 years. We're going to talk about Judgment Day 2003. Man, it doesn't feel like that was 20 years ago, but time flies. Here we go. And there's a lot going on. You know, we're picking up the pieces from WrestleMania 19. We've covered that recently in the archives. Go out of your way to check that out. Grilling JR on YouTube.com. That's Grilling JR on YouTube.com. But we've got some big changes in the company. Steve Austin is now officially retired. And I mean, he has been the torchbearer for this thing. I guess you could go back and say as far as 1997. And now we're going to get to see what wrestling looks like without Steve Austin, which, golly, he was so young at the time. And by the way, the more things change, the more they stay the same. We got a new sheriff in town. Goldberg is now with the company. He's actually going to take on and defeat The Rock at Backlash. We've covered that in our Goldberg episode as well as all the silly issues with the Goldust angle. But over on SmackDown, Brock Lesnar is now the WWE champ, and Kurt Angle is off with neck surgery. Vince McMahon has fired Hulk Hogan in storyline. And now we have this mysterious newcomer calling himself Mr. America. Roddy Piper is also back with the WWE full time or on a more regular basis on the heels of WrestleMania. And what do you know? Sable is back on SmackDown too. Lots of resets here, man. Kurt's out, Rock's gone, Austin's retired, Goldberg's here. A lot of moving parts in 03. Fair to say?
Yeah, very fair. And adjustments. You know, here's the thing. You don't replace a guy like Austin.
Right.
You know, you can get somebody to stand in his place. You can get somebody booked. You can try to book like him. You know, I use this all the time. And sometimes maybe it might be unfairly. I'm not sure. But with AEW guys, I think sometimes when they're doing something, they come ask me, did you like this? Or what do you think about that? I think to myself, how would we have booked Austin in his hottest?
Right.
Can we resemble anything close to that? And it's just hard to do. He's a once in a generation talent, and you don't replace once in a generation talents. You just hope to be able to adjust and not have too big a blip in the screen and move on. But not having Austin available to book and put him on television and live events and all the things he loved to do, wasn't it? Is huge adjustment. Huge adjustment.
I'm not envious of your role in this era. You know, you're running talent relations and this roster turnover and upheaval, and we're trying to keep the train on the tracks.
Yeah.
And it's business as usual the night after WrestleMania. It's Monday Night Raw, and we would see Eric Bischoff fire Steve Austin, beginning the whole dual GM gimmick. But it featured you cutting a red ass JR promo on Bischoff with the now well-known "no good son of a bitch" line. Even though Austin's going to be,
I apologize, Eric. It's all showbiz.
I loved it. I loved it. Even though Austin is going to be stepping out of the ring, and this is going to be the end of his in-ring career, with the exception of a little grab ass here and there, it's still important to try to keep Austin on TV as much as you can, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. You can't evaporate. You can't disappear. But you got to be careful how you use him, because the more you use him, the more people are going to want to see physicality.
Right.
You know, give me a stunner, will you? Or how about us having a beer together type thing? So, yeah, it was tough. It was tough because we had such a habit of booking Steve. You know, that was the easiest way to start booking a tour. Just start at the main event and work down. And Austin was always in those main events. So it was quite the adjustment.
We should talk about where the ratings are for this Raw after WrestleMania. It does a 3.74 rating, which in a vacuum sounds good until you realize the night after WrestleMania, the prior year, did a 5.28 rating. So it's a 30% drop year over year. And as if that's not enough, there's lots of house shows being canceled because of weak ticket sales.
Yep.
In fact, there's even 2 SmackDowns that are canceled due to weak advances. This is really the first time we've seen something like this happen since like the mid 90s. This is probably frustrating for Vince. I mean, this guy has enjoyed seemingly home run after home run for quite a while here in 2003. And then all of a sudden, it's like somebody turned the water off.
Yeah, well, that's one way of putting it. Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know that Vince, and I certainly wasn't prepared for the negative fallout that Stone Cold's retirement was going to have. But it was there, and we had to adjust, and we had to make it work. And we were going to have Stone Cold on the house shows. We weren't going to have Stone Cold in a match on Raw or whatever.
Right.
So it was tough. It was really tough to get readjusted to the new roster, the new lineup. We got a new quarterback. We got a new running back. We got new. And it was somewhat daunting, to say the least.
We should also mention that when these house shows get canceled, that's not something that's bad for the company. It's bad for the talent. You know, a lot of the talent is going to get most of their pay from these type of appearances. And so when these shows start getting cut out, well, they're going to be making less money as well. Are you hearing from a lot of talent when these cancellations are coming up? I mean, is it just griping, just business as usual, or what's that look like?
Pretty much business as usual. Everybody's going to complain about their pay if it's less than they were used to making. That's pretty much a guarantee. Pay is always the topic of conversation, and I understand that. I mean, that's how they make a living. So I think most of the questions I receive just, what are we going to do? How's this going to change? What can we do to get things back on track? So there were a lot of questions. Unfortunately, I didn't have all the answers that were needed, quite frankly, but there were a lot of questions.
Talk to me about when you quit this episode, April 7th. I guess Eric Bischoff fires you, but it looks like, when you guys go face to face, as he says to you, say it to my face. You do say you meant every word of it, quit and walk off. The crowd goes nuts. And then Bischoff, of course, fires you. And Jonathan Coachman is going to take over for the rest of the show and for the following few weeks. What do you think of this creative? And was there more at play here? Did you need to have some off the field stuff? Did you have a surgery or a family thing, or is this just creative?
Creative.
Okay.
And I don't know if it was good creative, but it
Right.
was what it was. I've never been real comfortable. I've mentioned that here, of becoming a character on TV. It was never my goal. It was never my dream. I wanted just to do what my job and do it really well. And but it was hard. It was hard. I've never been comfortable, as I said, in a participatory role. I like doing the broadcasting. That was what I was thought I was pretty decent at. And it seemed awkward at times, but because I wasn't sure where it was headed. I wasn't sure how long JR is going to be off. There were a whole lot of unanswered questions, quite frankly, in real life and in the professional side. So it was a unique time to be in WWE in my role, and one that if I had to do all over again, I probably would have tweaked a few things creatively, but to say it was all bad would be a misnomer.
We should talk about this April 7th episode of Raw, because here we see the return of Kevin Nash. Of course, he's been off with a quad injury. He's coming back here as a babyface to start a feud with Triple H over the world title. At this point, did you think Kevin had one more run on top in him?
Well, I was certainly hopeful. And if he could have a run with somebody, it would be his dear friend Triple H. They're best buddies, and Triple H was integral in getting Kevin to return. Kevin had his best days were behind him, but he still was a good enough worker. And then, of course, pairing him up with Triple H, who was the best heel in the business at that time, was timely. So it worked out pretty well. So you're just going to be hopeful that Triple H could adjust his game to some degree. Kevin was able to, I don't want to say keep up, because that's derogatory to me, but we needed Kevin to be able to step up and play. And I thought he did fine in that respect. He was never a great worker, but he was an attraction, and he could still be an attraction if handled correctly. And we were just trying to, how do we handle him correctly? How do we not expose his weaknesses and things of that nature? Can he stay healthy, et cetera, et cetera? So it was a lot of crossroads we're going through, a lot of stops and starts. So it worked out pretty well.
The big story on Raw is revolving around Hunter and how he's been lifelong friends, or so it seems, with Shawn Michaels and Kevin Nash, and they're all best friends, but now they're at complete odds with each other. And this is fun in 03, but I can only imagine how much more fun this would have been in, say, 96 or 97. Speaking of 96, 97, a name from the past pops up in the Observer. This is a quote from Dave. There was actually talk of bringing in Tony Schiavone for a few weeks to announce Raw. The feeling is they have to keep Jim Ross off TV several weeks to sell the angle. And everyone knows Jonathan Coachman is terrible, but Kevin Dunn nixed the idea. Man, how fun is that to think about? Tony Schiavone calling a Raw. What do you think of that idea?
No problem with it. It's I offer Tony getting more work and making some more paydays. It was met with a lukewarm reception, and that was like you said. Kevin Dunn was not a big Schiavone fan, apparently, by what we're talking about here. and he put the kibosh to that deal, and used a homegrown guy, Jonathan Coachman, to sit in my chair for a while. So it was a learning experience. I went to TV every week not knowing exactly what was going on. Was I going to be back on this week, or was there going to be a vignette, or what's going on? So again, more questions than answers, and that's not always a bad thing.
It's just fun to think about, man, what if we got Jim Ross calling a Nitro and we got Tony Schiavone calling a Raw? That sounds fun.
It might have been. I don't know. I have mixed emotions on that too, quite frankly. Again, I wanted to get back to some degree of normalcy.
Right.
And it was better for my game, but then all of a sudden it becomes very personal. And it's not all about you, JR. It's about the company, which it should be, and always has been. And so, it was a challenging time. And again, I was right in the middle of being a character, which is exactly where I did not want to be.
Right.
But it's not what JR wanted. It was what we were doing, and it was up to me to make it work. And I tried my best to do that with my absence from the announce table. I know Lawler was happy when I came back. I talked to Lawler just the other day, just recently. He's still struggling with his health, and he's got good doctors, and they think they pinpointed a lot of the issues, but he's not out of the woods yet as far as getting back to a good degree of health. And as always, when we talk, his voice starts off a little bit weak, and then it gets stronger as he talks, and we laugh and we tell stories with each other, so forth and so on. But you have that combination. I think sometimes the JR and the King thing was taken for granted, and that might be me just saying that because I believe it egocentrically. But it was pretty cool. I thought that what we had, and then again in the wrestling sense, well, we got this. Let's see if we can't screw it up. It's wrestling,
right?
Nothing's ever good enough. It's right. Well, let's try this change. And I am not a believer in change for change's sake. And I thought that was some of that stuff there. But Eric did a good job. He was a good character on television, and we had good heel babyface type heat. So it's just a role that I didn't feel comfortable doing because I didn't think I was very good at it, to be honest with you. So it worked out. We got through it. Here we are.
Are you, when you're off from your announcing duties here? Obviously, you're still at the show.
Yeah.
Are you producing, coach in the back, or what is your role at TV when you're not on TV?
Well, if Vince is in the mood to produce, he produced. If he wasn't, then I did, and helped coach and Jerry. I wasn't as busy a producer as this is or was, so it was a change. It was a change, but I was busy. Hey, look, you still got to pay these talents. There's still payroll to do, Conrad.
Right.
And they got to be paid. They're not on a salary at that time. You had to comply with everybody's payroll and their requirements and so forth. So you still had a lot to do. And then, of course, at TV is where all the talents were assembled, and that's where I got most of my work done when the talents were present. So it was a interesting time. I said that, but it was just a very interesting time. Some of my job descriptions, some of my things that I needed to do were still in place.
Right.
So the only element that was missing was JR on TV. And like I said, I have plenty of projects to do to get us back to some level of normalcy, at least for me. I worked hard at TVs. I talked to all the talents that wanted to talk, talked to talents that I needed to talk to for whatever reasons. And it seemed like it started leveling out a little bit. Talents just don't like to be left in the dark. They like to be told and illustrated what's going on. So it was tough. It was tough in that respect because some of the answers they were seeking, they meaning the talents, pronoun boy, was were not available. I didn't know the answer. We hadn't got there yet. So, and that was hard. Always like to answer questions directly, and that was a hard one.
Well, this might be a hard one. Tough Enough. It's going to be off TV here. MTV has declined to renew the show. Was that a surprise to you? I mean, it was the highest rated show on the night it ran on the station, and now they're kind of done with it. Is that more indicative of wrestling at large just cooling off a little bit, do you think?
I think it might have been. It might have been, but it was certainly a change. I thought the show was building an audience and a following,
Yes.
but apparently others didn't see it that way in the MTV side. So I thought it was a pretty cool deal for a long time. It worked out well. So anyhow, it was just that way, man. I mean, I'm trying to give you a better feel, but there are answers today I don't have
Right.
about why that angle went the way it went and how long it took and so forth. So, but it was a big adjustment, for an old veteran like me to be put into the role of a primary character that led to things. Because obviously the issue with Bischoff and I was going to lead to a match, which, Eric is infinitely a better worker than I in the ring, more athletic, younger, et cetera, et cetera. And, but I knew eventually that's where the crossroads would occur. Somewhere along the way, Bischoff would get his hands on JR, and he did with a cinder block and blood and all those things. So it was a unique time, Connie. It really was.
Well, we don't all have good news here. We've got a little more bad news with Jeff Hardy. He is 25 and officially fired on April 21st. Meltzer would say this is no surprise. He was taken off the house shows last weekend and suspended. He had been very negative as to the political nature of the company in his media appearances promoting his book. As reported before, he had twice been asked to be released to concentrate on his music. Meltzer would say he had looked terrible in the ring lately, and he had been suspended in the past. And there was a compromise that was reached where he was working a far more limited schedule in an effort to work with him, but it just wasn't working. I know this falls in your lap. What was his frustration? Was he just burned out on wrestling and travel?
I think he was burned out, quite frankly. I think you hit the nail on the head there. He just wasn't ready to settle down and to play by the rules. I remember Connie, I had several sit downs with Jeff, and probably more than I normally would have, but I liked him. I still like him. I'm glad he's at AEW. He's a big addition to what we're doing. So, but it was hard. It was hard for him. He wasn't sure what he wanted, but I knew what I wanted. I wanted a guy that was not getting high before he wrestled. I mean, that's just insanity. That's suicide. Can't do it. So, but I think he was a little bit burned out, and some guys handle pressure and their ascension to the top of the card in different ways. It's not an automatic fit. And I don't know that he was ready for his ascension. Seen a lot of tweets about the match he had with the ladder match with the Undertaker, and some of the calls that we made, and it was a high pressure cooker scenario. All of a sudden, he finds himself in a ring with Undertaker in a ladder match that he damn near wins.
Right.
One of the coolest tweets this week that I saw was somebody said that my call made them truly believe that Jeff was going to win the title in the ladder match. And so it worked in that respect. But it doesn't always work for the talent. The talent's got to still rise to the occasion and do all their things that they need to do. And that match really put Jeff, somebody, you hear this all the time, but it's not how you, it's not about who goes over, it's who gets over.
That's right.
And Jeff got over in that ladder match, even a losing effort. So it's one of the more memorable matches that I've called in my career. Again, I had a great interest in Jeff's success, but the main thing my interest was his health. And then you take that down one notch, and then there you got There you got Jeff, trying to wrestle impaired, and that's just insanity. We can't do it. And I remember telling him that. I said, you got to go to rehab again, or we can't use you. And it wasn't a debatable topic. It wasn't a debatable topic. We're not going to discuss. Well, what if we did this? What if we do this? You get help, and if you get help, we'll do business with you, and you'll make a lot of money. You're getting over. But he didn't see it that way.
So listen, let's jump back into it. We should talk about this episode of Raw from the 21st. The main event is Triple H and Booker, and they go 18 minutes. It's a title match, and this is sort of the opposite of WrestleMania, according to Dave. He says at Mania, they worked a good match, but the crowd was dead. And here, this is the main event, so the crowd was alive, even though the match was crap. Booker was sluggish, and Triple H was slow, and everything was just off. I don't know why, but it feels like that was kind of the case for Booker and Triple H. Did they just not have in-ring chemistry? What was missing?
I think the only thing that I could think of was the fact that they didn't have the chemistry to sustain on a regular basis. Chemistry. It was the same reason that Stone Cold would say about his matches with Taker. And I'm sure Taker would say the same thing. Taker and Stone Cold didn't have great chemistry. They worked together. They were pros, and they worked together, and they drew money together. But they weren't compatible from a psychological standpoint, timing standpoint, all those things. They're both alpha males. They're going to lead. They're going to dance to what they hear, and they were both hearing different music. And that's important, quite frankly, to success of any match. You got to make sure that you got some chemistry there, and you're on the same page. And it wasn't the fact they were jealous or there was a negative issue. It's just sometimes that's the way it is.
Right.
So anyway, Booker and Hunter may have been in that area, that area of town that you don't want to be in, where look at how good the Austin had the grocery store match with Booker.
Right.
They had chemistry. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but they had chemistry together. Maybe it's their Dallas connection or Texas in general. Hell, I don't know. But Triple H and Booker should have been better, in my opinion, than it was. You got two highly skilled workers. Should have been better. And it wasn't, and that's unfortunate. And I've never understood that, other than just saying it's that chemistry thing. And that's the only thing I could deduct from that whole crazy piece of business.
Well, at the end of this main event, we're going to see Jericho attack Booker, and eventually Flair and Jericho are going to attack Shawn Michaels, who was the special guest referee. That's going to bring Kevin Nash out for the save. But Triple H is going to double cross Nash, give him a low blow, leaving him laying. Eventually, for the live crowd, after the show's off the air, Nash is going to come back and beat up Triple H. This is just interesting. That's the only way to say it. This is our top program. It's
Right.
It's not Angle. He's out. It's not Austin. He's gone. It's not Rock. He's gone. We're trying to find something here because we're still trying to do the brand split too. So the company is trying to reinvent itself, recreate itself. And Vince McMahon holds a meeting with all the talent before the Backlash pay-per-view to emphasize what the agents and JR have been urging to talent, which is a change in the style. We need to be more mat-based. We need to be more psychology-oriented in our product. And Meltzer would say the results are going to be more growing pains, or actually non-growing educational pains. It's far easier to appeal to the audience with high-flying and faster-paced products, particularly the young male demo the company covets. Switching styles is even more dangerous because the 80s wrestling audience that understands the style they're trying to implement has largely been run off. The newest audience was weaned on dangerous spots. And with the company's economic indicators all falling, this would seem like the worst possible time for such a change, but it is largely necessary.
Yeah.
From your perspective, was it necessary just because we can't keep raising the stakes?
Right.
point where you can't top it anymore? Or
Wanted to be more safe,
yes,
safer, less doctor bills, less time away from the matches. We'd already lost we already had insurmountable losses. So those talents you just mentioned
yes,
no longer being there. And what we have to realize, you just can't replace an Austin or a Rock. I mean, all that stuff happened at one time, and it was just very hard to move past. So, growing pains is a good description, but I think it was necessary to get refocused back on more fundamentally sound, athletically sound wrestling. And it was going to be a growing pain situation. Everybody was not going to be, it's not going to be favorable to everybody's style, but the style wasn't hard to do. For a lot of guys, it's just going back to what they used to do. And but we needed to make a change, I thought, and get refocused and play to our strengths. And so that was kind of the thought process. But we knew it was not going to be a pretty transition.
let's remind everybody coming out of Backlash, the big pushes are Goldberg becoming the new lead babyface with a win over The Rock, Kevin Nash trying to be a legit title contender, John Cena as a possible new main eventer, and Sean O'Haire trying to get the Roddy Piper rub. It's not the most well-received pay-per-view or the most financially successful, but we're back at it the next night on Raw, and Goldberg is booked as a monster, just destroying Steven Richards, Rico, Rosie, Jamal, Christian, and Chris Jericho during a highlight reel. I mean, this has to be a top priority with Austin out. And of course, Rock is going to be going to make some movies. You got to get Goldberg as hot as you can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Get him over to a new audience, essentially. You know, we have to understand the WCW audience and the WWE audience were different breeds of cat. They knew what they liked, and they knew what Eric was booking and whoever was booking was doing. So, but we had to get Goldberg over. The nice thing is that we'd gotten another talent over. Austin and Goldberg had some similarities, obviously, look, intensity, attitudinal. So we kind of knew how to do that. It was just a matter of getting there, getting to that destination that we were seeking. But we had, it wasn't like an option. We had to get Goldberg over.
Ultimo Dragon is officially signing his contract. He is asked to start in May. He wanted to put over SEMA for their promotion. And we know Ultimo Dragon didn't work out in WWE, but man, he was one of my favorites in WCW. Why don't you think he enjoyed more success with WWE?
I don't know. That's a good question. He was a really talented guy. No doubt about that. But for some reason, it just didn't click. It may have been who we booked him with. I don't know. But he was very, very talented. There's no doubt about that. And he should have had more success in WWE than he earned. Like you, I enjoyed his work in WCW when I would catch it. But it just didn't pan out. And it's one of those head scratchers. He's such a talented guy. It's almost like, well, hell, he can't fail. Oh, yeah, he can. And he did.
Well, here's something that we couldn't do. An interesting Raw angle. The main event is Eric Bischoff versus Trish Stratus. And the idea is Trish gets a title shot if she wins. But if she loses, she has to sleep with Eric Bischoff.
Oh, Lord.
Stratus misses with a kick that Bischoff has to sell. Victoria lays her out, as does Jazz. Bischoff gets the pin in 3 minutes and 16 seconds. And then Linda shows up and hints that Bischoff is going to be fired for his behavior. And he explained he wasn't really going to sleep with Trish. It was just a step made for compelling television. And on the Tron, when she came out, they accidentally put the Austin tape on for a split second. So before she could make her announcement, Bischoff starts hitting on her as well, saying he's far more interested in a mature woman. And she announces that Austin is the new co-GM. And Meltzer would say Austin has gained some weight, and it's clear his neck is in far worse shape than anyone can imagine because it has almost no rotation. He ends up giving Bischoff a big stunner to a big pop to end the show. Listen, co-GMs with Austin and Bischoff, this is going to be good TV.
I think so.
Way. to try to get your biggest star back on TV, right?
Yeah, it was a way to get Austin through the back door without damaging his neck anymore. And again, trying as best we could to keep Steve in the picture in a unique way for Stone Cold. But like you said at the end of that show, the fans got what they wanted. They wanted a stunner and some beer drink, and that's what we gave them. Steve could do that, but for him too, that was just a band-aid, stopgap. He did it because it was the right thing to do for the company, but he wasn't overwhelmed with his new role. And how could he be? He was a starting quarterback. He was Tom Brady, and all of a sudden, hey Tom, we're going to put you on the third team, or you're going to do your retirement thing, and so there we go. And he can't be replaced. And that's what we found out very quickly. Austin can't be replaced. Rock can't be replaced. And we were faced with a scenario where we had to replace them, whether we liked it or not. And we didn't like it. But that's what happens. It's a game of being healthy and doing your gig. And Steve thought he was kind of letting people down because he couldn't go do the things he used to do. But we got the best out of him that we could based on the new role that he was going to be fulfilling.
Well, over on SmackDown, man, we got some new talent coming in, and it's Mr. America doing the old Midnight Rider gimmick that Dusty Rhodes had made famous.
And Stagger Lee, don't forget him.
And the story here is based around Vince firing Hogan, and Stephanie signs Hulk as Mr. America, quote unquote, sight unseen. He's going to debut on a Piper's Pit. Roddy's going to say it's Hogan. Vince is going to say it's Hogan. And of course, Mr. America denies. And as they try to attack him and unmask him, he fires back to end the show. What do you think of this Mr. America concept?
Well, again, like I said, frivolously, we did the same angle in the Mid-South with Junkyard Dog.
Right.
As Stagger Lee and Coming Cowboy's partner, and et cetera, et cetera. And Dusty did it with Midnight Rider. And then, I can't remember. I think Nelson Royal was involved in that Dusty angle, the campfire vignettes that some people might remember. So I didn't have a problem with it because it had been done before. There was precedent, and you hope that it'll get over again. I don't think it got over. It didn't seem like it got over. I might be wrong.
It didn't. We should talk about. You mentioned earlier, sometimes Vince would be producing Coach. That actually makes the newsletter.
Really?
That there's a report that Vince was on headsets in the gorilla position, screaming at Coachman all night, "You're blowing it." And at times, Coach was so frazzled he was afraid to talk. and Vince yelling at announcers and being in their ear is a narrative that at this point is at least 25 years old. Back then, though, how bad was he with Coach? Do you recall?
Well, I wasn't there all the time, but it was pretty aggressive, very discerning. It was very distracting. I don't know how Coach could have done what he did, being yelled at by the most powerful man in the business. It was intimidating. So, but that's how Vince liked it. He liked the edge and all that stuff. He was trying to bring Coach to a different level without admitting that maybe Coach at that point in time in his career just wasn't meant for this role. But it was what it was, Connie. It was what it was. He liked it, and he liked the controversy. He liked the pressure he could put on people. He thought it would bring the best out of him. And I'll admit, there were times when he got on the headset with me and pissed me off, and I think maybe it increased my work performance. I'm not sure. I think it did. But it pisses you off, you get motivated, and all of a sudden, boom, you're at a different level, which is what he wanted.
Right.
Sometimes it just took a little bit additional motivation to make that happen.
The Observer is also going to report that Dutch Mantell, who was booking the IWA in Puerto Rico, was recently turned down when he applied for a job writing for WWE. He doesn't even get an interview. That's that's always been interesting to me. Why don't you think guys like Dutch and Kevin Sullivan ever wound up being writers for this company?
It's a good question. Just the going back to the old school, too old school, and as Vince might say, too wrestling.
Okay.
Might have been part of the reason. It's just he wasn't comfortable with it. He wasn't comfortable with the old school guys, even though we're doing a lot of old school things. Still, it was challenging, and I don't know if he trusted all the old territory guys. I have no idea, but to say that Dutch couldn't help us in the booking area would be a misnomer, in my opinion, because he's a very bright guy, still is, and he could have done he could have probably helped us there, quite frankly. So a lot of those guys could contributed. It's just Vince didn't care to. He liked to be able to control that writers' room, and with all those old veterans that we're talking about right now, that strategy and that philosophy might not have worked.
Let's talk a little bit about superstar Billy Graham. He does a deal with Vince McMahon to promote his book and bringing him back into the family with WWE. This has been a long time coming. I mean, back in 91, superstar Billy Graham was all over every television set talking about doing steroids and really not helping Vince's cause at all. Were you surprised to see Vince bring superstar back?
Well, no, not after making the Mr. America character and all these other changes that we're undergoing. Vince seemingly was willing to try about anything that he thought might work. So you got to hand it to him for that. I always like Billy. Billy's in bad health right now, and we pray for his healing. He's had a tough challenge. I read his wife's posts on Facebook just kind of keep up with Billy. But he's one of my all-time favorite performers. He was a trendsetter, and of course, with that body of his, he was nobody like him. Great big personality, great big look, even then. So I wasn't totally surprised, but I was happily surprised because it was good that good old Billy got some work and got some help promoting his book, et cetera, et cetera. So the main thing right now for Billy Graham in today's world, we just hope that he can heal and can get a better quality of life because he certainly deserves it and is being challenged right now physically, no doubt.
Let's talk about Miss Elizabeth. Another piece of sad news from this era. She passes away on May 1st. Man, such a lovely woman, such a big part of my fandom as a kid. How are you guys first notified about what has happened with her?
Probably Howard. Howard Finkel may have been the one that broke that story. I'm thinking that was kind of his gig. So yeah, he was Howard was the messenger in that situation. I don't remember meeting Elizabeth maybe over once or twice. She was never there in WWE when I was there. And a lot of that was because of Randy. Randy was sometimes hard to get along with. And he certainly had a unique way of managing Elizabeth, as we all can harken back to. So anyway, yeah, it was a sad ending. She was from what everybody says, such a nice, lovable, sweet lady that got caught up in shit.
Right.
And the drugs, man, it's a horrible thing. It's to be dependent on drugs and I when I heard it was drugs that was involved, I was shocked. She just didn't strike me as the kind of person that would succumb to a drug issue.
Right.
She just didn't seem to be that person. But unfortunately she was, and it took her life.
That's just a story we heard a lot back then in that era, and it's just it's hard to find a silver lining.
There is none. You're right. There is no silver lining, Conrad. Drugs is a bad thing. Drugs is a really, really bad thing.
Let's talk about the house shows. Dave's going to point out something that I think is kind of obvious, but maybe we don't talk about enough. These house shows that are getting canceled because of poor attendance and the bad payoffs that the roster are getting might have something to do with the fact that the television stars they're seeing on Monday Night Raw and SmackDown, they're not really here. A lot of the top stars have it in their contract where they're just working TVs and pay-per-views. And that's a bit of a paradigm shift from the way the company used to operate once upon a time. I mean, even Hogan was working a ton of house shows way back when, but this more relaxed schedule. Is this something you feel like what I find so interesting with that, Jim, is it's not like there's really anywhere else to work. And I understand TNA is a thing, but not really. They don't have the budget to compete. Why did you feel like you didn't have the leverage to force talent to work house shows?
Talents are getting older. They couldn't hold up to an aggressive schedule that includes the house show runs. We had to slow them down a little bit just because of their age, their injury situation, surgeries, healing. So it was a matter of just trying to adjust the schedule to fit more compatibly with the talents, the veteran talents, who just couldn't hold up. And that's why we wanted to get younger. And that's why guys, essentially like John Cena, was so important, because he was young and healthy and durable. You know, Cena was Lou Gehrig, man. And for those baseball aficionados, you know what I'm talking about, the Iron Man.
Yeah.
And so he was Cena was imperative that we get him over, because he was, like I said, he was young and he was a great baby face and he was durable. God dang, Cena was a stud, boy. And he took that job as a top baby face to heart. It really was important to him to lead the team. He wanted to be the captain of the team, like he was the captain of the football team at Springfield College in Massachusetts. That was his mindset. That's how he approached the game. And man, we needed it at that point in time, because he became the captain of the team in an unofficial way.
Let's talk about, you talked about how we had to get to a more map-based style and it was safer for the athletes. And Vince held a big talent meeting saying, guys, we gotta slow it down. We got to be more map-based. We can't do all these crazy stunts. And then 3 days later, they announced a ladder match at the next pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. That's kind of hard to wrap your head around, isn't it?
Oh, well, I guess the thought was that these ladder matches can be managed. They can be booked in a quasi-safe way, but you're still going to take some massive bumps because you're falling from the ladder.
Right.
And I think that was kind of how I saw it anyway, was, some things we can do and some things we couldn't. The ladder slipped through. The ladder matches were something that we felt like we could still manage and not kill the guys or gals. So that was where we were on that deal. So it was somewhat controversial as far as what we just told the talent in the talent meeting. Now we're going to have a ladder match, and those guys go out and do a ladder match. The Hardys and the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, kind of set the table for that deal.
Yeah.
And then, so it was really important that we could still maintain some of our high-profile matches and setups. The ladder match is a great way to have a really exciting piece of business on Raw or pay-per-view, SmackDown, whatever. So it was challenging, to say the least, Connie. It just was hard to just understand what we're doing, what we're leaving out, what are we going to add, what are we going to delete, how are we going to maintain the shelf life of these guys. You got how many look at the surgeries.
Right.
We had tons of surgeries, and to address those issues realistically, you got to make some change. And that was what was hard, was talents making some changes. They didn't want to. They wanted to work the way they've been working, and it was their comfort zone. So it was hard. I had a lot of talents could talk. Can we do this? Can we do that? I'd like to do this. And a lot of that just had to go right to Vince. and generally when the talents went to Vince to converse, not confront,
Right.
they got what they wanted, and guaranteeing him that they could be safe and they'd take care of themselves and their opponent, and so forth and so on. So it was an interesting journey for all of us to be on in uncharted waters.
It's interesting that this is towards the end or one of the last brand exclusive pay-per-views. And the main programs here are Piper and Hogan. They're not going to be on the pay-per-view. And Goldberg is the new top babyface, also not scheduled to wrestle on the show. It feels like this brand extension has were you ever in favor of the brand split? I mean, I understand that at times it's a necessary evil because the roster's so doggone big and you only have so much TV time. But this becomes really challenging for WWE then, and it feels like even now. Would you agree?
I like the brand split if it's pure. In other words, if you're drafted to Raw, you're a Raw guy, or
Right.
SmackDown, you're a SmackDown person. So I had no issues with that whatsoever. As a matter of fact, if we could develop some stability and some continuity with these split rosters, we have the chance to get some new guys over and establish some new marriages, shall we say. So I was not opposed to the brand split in general, but I really believe that to make it successful, it had to be a pure brand extension. It had to be pristine. If you're a Raw guy, you wrestle on Raw. That simple. But then all of a sudden, creative needed a body, and they needed this, and they needed that. So then the compromise was put into place. Well, he's a Raw guy, but he's gonna be on SmackDown this week. I didn't understand why we did that. I thought that was a negative, and I still do. So, and that's all this controversy in WWE right now about, who's the champ and who's undisputed and all this other stuff. It's just they're still dealing with it, but it's going to be continually dealt with until you get the pure brand split where Raw guys that's their team, and SmackDown, that's their team, and they play on their team weekly. But that's not always the case, and it's confusing to the fans sometimes. It's hard to justify the brand split when you're in this scenario. And of course, you had the same shit with the talent. I'm losing my ride. We had to be cognizant of relationships. You got a guy that's got a fiance or a girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, and they are used to traveling together, getting their room and all that stuff. And then those days were history. So we had to be very careful in how we split people up. And because they lose their ride, like I said, they lose their rides, which may sound like a minor deal, but it's not. So like I said, I like the brand split, except for the fact that there's just too much crossover, and I didn't like the crossover.
Here in this era that I, for one, didn't think we'd ever see again, Sable is back in the WWE. She's back on SmackDown. She's making her return. Given the way she left and the big high dollar lawsuit, it felt like, well, we'll never see her again, and she's back.
Yes, sir.
What do you remember about her return?
I was kind of concerned about how well we would be able to negotiate a deal, and what her demands were, because she knew what she was worth. She knew what she was worth, and we knew that from a merchandise standpoint, we could probably get a return on the investment on that merch. And she was a great cameo person. She was great to do a walk on, a reoccurring role on television, because she still had that great appeal. She was a beautiful woman. She had great charisma and had that animal magnetism, shall we say. So she was a hit. She was a keeper. And I, for one, was glad that she came back. To me, I never had I had a lot of issues trying to negotiate a contract with China. China was demanding that she make the same money that Austin was making. And I thought that might be a little bit far-fetched.
Right.
And that was ended up being the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. It's just you're not going to get $1 million guarantee. And she didn't understand why. She thought she was a bigger star, actually, than Austin because she was female and had that advantage, uniqueness, one of a kind, one off type deal.
Right.
So, but Rena was never hard for me to do business with. I remember meeting with her in my office, and she wanted to come back and make things right. I think she had second thoughts about how she left, and I just thought that it was not a bad thing. And you sometimes just you got to have a short memory in wrestling. You ever have, I've had plenty of talents I've booked that I didn't like. I wish they weren't there because they're a pain in the ass.
Right.
But you got to do what's best for the company. That's why I tell everybody. It's not about your personal issues or your conflicts. Get your shit settled. I'll help you if I can, but you got to want to help me too. Because at the end of the day, if we can't solve your problem, we have to eliminate it.
Right.
It's real simple. So, but she was fine. She had a little different approach than did China. And so I relayed that to Vince. How'd your meeting go? It went great. She wants to get a fresh start. She wants to erase how she left. And I think I, for one, am all in favor of hiring her back. And he agreed, and we did. And it seemed like it worked out okay.
It's not just Sable coming back. The Intercontinental title is scheduled to return on Raw, and we're going to crown the first champion of the new reinstated belt with a battle royal that's open to all former Intercontinental champions. Wrestlers have been given hints with far lower than projected buys for Mania that the payoffs are going to be much lower than expected. That's according to the Wrestling Observer. We've heard guys like Kevin Nash say way back when, man, you didn't know what type of year you were going to have until you got your WrestleMania check. Mm-hmm. When the rumors are eyes are down for this one, this is another thing that's going to land on your plate. Talent relations, you're going to be getting phone calls about this, no?
Oh, yeah, of course. Money. Cash and creative are the two C's that we always have to be aware of. Anytime you're reading online or some story about a talent or what have you, it's generally the uncomfortableness comes from they're unsure about their cash, and then of course their creative is going to influence the cash they make. Where they use the main events, do they get over? They have good performances on a consistent basis. Were you a good team player? All those things. So it's always the same two things, and that's what made my job. I don't want to say it made it easier, but it made it more predictable. Because I knew if a talent said, "Hey, JR, can I see you this afternoon?" And sure, you can. Well, I knew right then it was going to be about cash or creative.
Right.
I can't think of a situation where it wasn't. And so talents would come in and talk, and of course you'd cut to the chase. At least I would, because I didn't have time to bullshit with them. And we'd go over that and move on. So, but it was cash and creative, baby. That's the name of the game, and it still is to this very day, without a doubt. It's not changed. No matter how much we want it to change or we think it needs to change, it hasn't changed. When so much monies are distributed on a discretionary basis, you've got to be aware of cash and creative. That's the bottom line. That's what wives want to know. How much money are you going to get? Because guys that were on a guarantee who took their monies as they earned it. So in other words, they weren't on a weekly stipend. Their wives want to know how much money we're going to make this week. I need to buy a new fridge. I need to buy a washer and a dryer, or whatever. Normal stuff,
right? That
you don't normally associate with wrestling. So, but I thought that it's always the same two things, and so And the thing about it is, what are you going to say to somebody? Hey, look, if you got an idea for creative for your character, pitch it. Don't hold it back. Pitch it and see where it goes. If you have that much confidence in your idea, which I assume you would have, you might make this thing work and solve one of your issues where you're involved in your own creative, which is good. Every talent should have a hand in their creative so they can invest in it and deliver. Stand and deliver a pro wrestling angle. And then the other thing is during the process of that, if we get something hot, all of a sudden your cash situation, your cash flow situation has been addressed to some degree. You know, is it ever going to get back to Austin's level in that era? No. We got to refocus, retool the roster and the marriages. And do we have the right guys playing heel? Do we have the right guys playing babyface?
Right.
You know, all those things. It was tough. It was tough, Connie.
Let's talk about you getting back behind the announcing desk. It finally happens in early May. Jerry Lawler is going to pin Sean Morley so you can announce again. Of course, not without some shenanigans. Bischoff's involved and Austin's involved, and it winds up with Morley being fired, and I think Coachman's going to be fired. And you know, it's all storyline. You said you hated this sort of thing, but hey, at least you're back behind the desk.
Yeah.
We haven't spent much time talking about Coach, though. Do you think he ever got a fair shake as a commentator?
Not as a play-by-play guy.
Right.
That wasn't his forte. He had not been trained in for that role. I mean, it's a different pacing. I said this before on here on the show that, you know, when you got Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, and myself doing Rampage on TNT, we had three guys that have grown up in the business as play-by-play people. So there's a different timing. There's a different time to get in and to get out without question. And it's a different role. It's a different cadence. And so Coach was not prepared for that. And then he's replacing JR, who had a lot of experience. And sometimes that works out good and sometimes it doesn't. But I thought he was good, really good at backstage things. I thought he was really good at interviews and when we need a little bit of comedy or levity, let me up type thing. Coach is very, very good at that. But he was never trained to be a play-by-play guy, which comes with it with a whole different set of house rules, quite frankly. And I think he was used okay, but he was never going to be a play-by-play guy. It just wasn't his calling.
Booker is going to be here wrestling Lance Storm. Storm's going to come out waving the Canadian flag, and he's a total baby face. The biggest pop is when he uses a sharpshooter, and of course he loses to Booker in 2 minutes and 34 seconds. Why was the company seemingly always insistent on beating wrestlers in their hometown? I mean, even recently, like Zelina Vega, I mean, you see the pop like Carlito got in Puerto Rico, and it's like, this is the way it should be every time. But sometimes Vince likes to go the other way, and you were a victim of that. Can you wrap your head around that?
Many times I've been a victim of it.
Yeah.
You know, I've kissed Vince's ass in Oklahoma City. I've gotten beaten up by a variety of people. I never had a shining moment to any degree when I was a quote unquote participant. My issue with that, Conrad, so people can understand this, the glory should go to the talent.
Right.
They're uncomfortable. They saw their TV time reduced, and then some of their TV time was replaced by an announcer, an older, overweight announcer. What the hell? What the hell? I didn't need that role. It took time away from the guys that are making a living doing it. So, you know, I just didn't. That's why I didn't like doing them. I didn't think I was very good at it, and I thought it took time away from the active wrestlers who were looking to get a foothold and to make an impression through the creative that they helped influence.
Let's talk about La Resistance. They're going to become an act on TV here. Rene Dupree and Sylvain. What'd you think of these two young cats and their start to the company here?
They're just a mid-card preliminary team. They're just getting started. They weren't around long enough to make a determination how good they could be or might be or will be. They didn't get the time for that deal. Those two cats were Pat Patterson creation. Pat, French Canadian. Those two cats are both French lads. So, and with Pat's backing, they got every second chance that you could get, because we all had so much respect for Patterson. And Pat loved those kids, and he wanted them to be able to follow in his footsteps in reality, as far as having a viable gimmick, emphasizing their heritage. So, but I never saw main event status in them, but I did see they were solid. They could always have a good match. They're in good shape. They were hungry, or as we say here in Oklahoma, hungry. So it was a really unique scenario, quite frankly. I remember one time I played a rib on Pat. I had, I think, who was it? Was there Sylvan? What was the other one's name?
You're talking about La Resistance?
Yeah.
Oh, Rene Dupree.
Yeah, Rene. Anyway, one of the two I had thrown out of the building because I could. It was a rib. It was a joke. It was all it was. And God damn, that caused a stir. I remember I was on one side of the ring with Patterson shooting the breeze about something. You never had anything. You never were lacking for conversation with Pat. God bless him. He sure missed. He's really missed. And Patterson's philosophy, Conrad, was exactly kind of where we were wanting to go with these changes. Tell a good story, figure out what body part you think you might work, so because it connects the dots. It's an easier story to tell. If you're going to work on the back, then work on the back and don't deviate. Don't go away from the story. So anyway, I had him ejected for this being ornery. And he was screaming at Pat, 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 Pat. Pat, he saw it. It was like a child, and you go home and your house is on fire. Pat sprinted over to where he was, and of course shut down the exit. But that was just being ornery. But they're good kids. I just didn't see main event status in them, Connie. That's all. That's not an indictment. And maybe they would have got there in time. I don't know. They had a chance to get there, no doubt about that. They're talented, but they just weren't main event guys in that era.
I don't know why, but I'd never heard the story of you having a guy thrown out. Just that's
it was a rib.
Yeah,
that's all it was. It's Joe, and not a good rib. Just screwing with the pad a little bit and the talents. So, but it was just a rib. I didn't mean any hostility with it or anything along those lines. It wasn't ribbing on the square. It was to get a reaction from Patterson, because he was famous for doing this stuff. I thought he owed me one.
Yeah, he did. Let's talk about creative here for a minute. This is a great point from Dave. He says Bischoff was on the phone to Linda McMahon complaining about Steve Austin. Bischoff started hitting on Linda, but she hung up. He thought it was bad cell service. I think Bischoff hitting on Linda is great, but it would have been 50 times more effective if he hadn't hugged Vince. I wish I just had 1/10 of the money they've thrown in the incinerator over the past 2 years. Man, I didn't really think about that until just now, but creatively, it could have been a lot more fun and entertaining and interesting if Bischoff showed up and was at odds with Vince rather than showing up and hugging Vince. Would you have seen that play out a little more successfully, you think?
Yeah, maybe. It's just hard to, in a quasi-realistic sense, to pit Bischoff as a major antagonist against the owner of the company and not get fried for it. So I think that's what the situation was, is that it was simply a fact that let's give Bischoff a little time to get entrenched here, and so he can establish a little bit of a leverage advantage, if that's possible, considering that Vince McMahon is the owner and the strong owner of the entire company.
We get to see what could have been on Monday Night Raw. Steve Austin and Goldberg are in the ring together for the first time. This would have been a dream match just 5 years prior, but they're not going to fight, of course, because Austin is retired. So instead, they're going to be best friends and drink a bunch of beer together in the ring. But it's hard not to get excited just seeing them in the ring together and thinking, man, what could have been not too long ago. Is that one of the big ones you think that got away? I mean, in hindsight, that could have been monster, huh?
Oh, yeah, it got away. It's just, I guess you could say it wasn't meant to be. I mean, did we not see the potential of that angle? Well, hell yeah.
Right.
But we also have to realize Austin's got a damaged neck. I mean, a serious neck injury. And so it just couldn't happen. And that's sad when you need a match to draw, you need that WrestleMania main event, and you're looking for one, and you finally discover, let's do Austin and Goldberg, and let's build it for a year and get to WrestleMania and have the match. That would have been a perfect scenario, easily booked, easily structured. But then when Steve got hurt, it just wasn't to be. And so we couldn't do it. We couldn't do it. We wanted to, we couldn't. That's frustrating as hell. When you can take your pencil. The most powerful weapon in wrestling is the eraser. By the way, it's not a pile driver or something along those lines. It's the eraser. When you can erase somebody's name and put Austin's name in there, everything changes. Everything changes. And but we couldn't do that because we couldn't get Austin cleared to work. And he was not able to work. We didn't even ask him to work because that's just going to be more angst and more, more anxiety for him because you know how badly nobody wanted to work more, Steve to work more than Steve. And I was very protective of him and not put him into a situation where he's got to, you can't wrestle, but can you do this?
Right.
Well, how about this? And when you get a proud guy, it's like saying Mickey Mantle's going to bat fourth and clean up, but we're moving him down to the ninth hole. What? It's not the same. So the occasional stunner, the occasional beer, maybe something that he was driving, like he's on his new TV show now on A&E. He drives things. He moves things around. Maybe we could get by with some of that, but at some point in time, that ceases to work. It's old. We've seen this now. What are we going to do? A Zamboni and do it a different color?
Right.
Another milk truck. This time with him doing it. What did Kurt do?
He did the milk truck.
Milk truck?
Yeah.
Oh, that's when I said Milkamania is running wild.
Yep.
I don't know where that came from. Jesus Christ. Anyhow, so there's where we were. And then we haven't even talked about the Rock's absence.
Right.
Jesus Christ. Arguably the two greatest baby faces of this modern era. The two greatest stars of this modern era. All of a sudden, both are erased from your roster. They're no longer there. We had a booking sheet I used to book with and appearances and things. It was just a roster. And on one side of it was the baby faces, and the other side of it was the heels. And then there was a miscellaneous column for walk-on roles. Austin was in the miscellaneous column. I never showed him that because it would have broke his heart. But he really, that was the final. You knew then, hey, look, you've been moved from the babyface side to the miscellaneous side. Miscellaneous means like Sergeant Slaughter. Let's get Sarge in to do this bit. Let's get so-and-so in to do this. But we did that a little bit. But the shelf life is short. So anyhow, Stone Cold was I still try to protect him. And, and if I was there today or he was there today or things are different, I do the same thing. You take care of your players. No matter if everybody can't be Austin, but everybody deserves the same level of respect and, detail, attention to detail. And certainly Steve had that. He was what we wanted. He was everything that we wanted, and we didn't have it anymore. So, and we became very one-dimensional, very Austin-esque for a long time. Conrad taught me a good lesson. That pardon me, we had Steve. Everything was branded Stone Cold. We had to remove the brands. It's kind of like rebranding the company. I mean, let's not forget this guy here got over selling tickets and pay-per-views. Was one of the leading catalysts to the company going public. And we can all see where the company going public has meant to WWE today. It's amazing. And that's why I'm so excited about the fact that, I think that I'm not 100% sure, but I think, Conrad, that the gate for London is over 8 million American.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. It's amazing. I've never experienced anything like this London thing in my entire career. I'm so excited to be a part of it because it is history in the making. And I know we used to throw that around a lot, but it is history in the making. So it's a hell of an accomplishment. So, and I really believe the old deal, high tides raise all ships. It did for Mid-South when Vince got hot. I was working in that territory, and I was working in roles where the more cash we generated, the more money I made. So I paid attention to that. So, yeah, it was. It's just been amazing how that's worked out. I don't know how I got on that topic, but this, things can get hot. You never know when it's going to happen. It's that lightning in a bottle thing, man. But you're not going to replace Austin or Rock. So I stopped trying. And that was a little conflict I had with Goldberg. He looked so much like Austin, that I'm thinking, wait a minute. Are we reminding the audience that we're trying to replace Stone Cold with Goldberg every time Goldberg goes out? An argument could be made for that. But you're not going to cut off your nose to spite your face. So hopefully we could get Goldberg hot like Eric and his crew got him hot there in Atlanta.
Back into it, man. Let's talk about Batista. He's going to tear his right triceps muscle again, which is turning into a chronic thing, according to Dave Meltzer, and this could become career-threatening. The report was that he fell while jogging with his wife, and he underwent surgery on May 1st in Birmingham. This second injury was worse than the first, and he's expected to be out until October or November. And we're trying to get some momentum with Batista, and we know he's eventually going to get there and become the man in just another year or two.
Yeah.
Boy, it was off to a rough start here with these tricep tears left and right.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. You got to fix this thing.
Right.
If they're doing things that are high level or high opportunity injury risk, then you want to address it? I would think you would. So, but guys like, big muscle guys, thick muscle guys like Batista, and several we can name, no reason to. I mean, it's just obvious answers. The heavy muscle guys are more prone to get injured. Right. The attachment to a muscle doesn't grow because you're stronger. The attachment is what God gave you. The size of the muscle is what you develop. And so the attachment never strengthens. I've learned a lot from Dr. Andrews, Jim Andrews. Man, he bailed our ass out plenty of times. He was MVP of down there in this clinic in Birmingham. So he's brilliant. He's brilliant. He helped us a lot, as I said. But the attachment doesn't strengthen. So that means the heavier the muscle, the more pressure there's on the attachment, the tendon, the ligament, whatever the hell you want to call it. And those snap. The muscle rolls up the arm, surgery, blah blah blah. So it's a tough deal. So that's why one of the reasons we changed. I mean, you look at these damn doctor bills. You think that Dr. Andrews is cheap for a
No,
major bicep rebuild?
no.
Thousands and thousands of dollars. Plus, we got to pay the talent his salary or his downside guarantee while he's off.
Right.
Meaning that's more money going out the door. So you want to try to limit those monies going out the door scenarios as best you can. That's all.
Well, that makes sense to me, especially when business is down. Let's talk about that. Year over year from 02 to 03 here. Attendance is down 35% from April of 02 to April of 03. And gates are down 40%. The average Raw rating is down 22.6%, and SmackDown is down 13%. Everywhere you look, it's a bad business indicator, and we got to turn this ship around. And it's not always easy with the talent. Just as quickly as Roddy Piper was in, he's back out. Dave Meltzer had this to say. Roddy Piper didn't appear on SmackDown on May 8th due to problems with reaching a deal between the two sides. Piper was advertised for Halifax and was in Eastern Canada at least a day before the show. But Piper did not have a contract with the company before doing Mania or the past few weeks of SmackDown. The company has been unable to reach a deal or even come. There was a time when a decision was going to be made. Piper's own personal deal, another one of the holdups, is they don't want to put Lewis, his personal assistant, on payroll or pay for a ticket to fly him in. And Meltzer is going to speculate that Hulk Hogan probably pays for Jimmy Hart to come in on his own. And because of that, the two sides are at an impasse before TV, and Piper was not even mentioned on the show. And it was all worked out by the 15th. The following week, Piper was back, and they set up the match with Hogan. Unfortunately, the match was announced just 3 days before the pay-per-view, and for a bout like that to be effective, it would have needed a few weeks of build-up.
Yep.
How does this happen? How are we putting a guy on camera who's not under contract, and what do you remember about the stumbling block? Was it all about this personal assistant?
Mostly, yeah. It's asinine. He wanted to break a trend that had been around forever. It's not like this guy's his valet. He's going to be appearing at ringside and earning his keep. He was an errand guy. He made sure, even though the WWE did the travel, he had to follow up on travel and bullshit things, hotel reservations. Did Roddy have the right room, and did it have one bed or two, and all that stuff? It was not going to happen. Just wasn't going to happen. I think you're right. I'm not that I could verify it, but I think that Hogan, out of his own pocket, took care of Jimmy Hart.
Right.
And, but that wasn't the case here. I don't think Roddy wanted to do that. He's just too old school. But requesting that, I suggest this: if Hogan didn't have Jimmy Hart, then Roddy would not have wanted his guy to be in a similar role. That's just wrestlers, So I don't, and it's not healthy. So anyway, Roddy outsmarted himself, and I love Roddy. I mean, he was so much fun to talk to, and we developed a good rapport thanks to Jerry Briscoe, because they had that run, and they were in the Carolinas together for Crockett's Mid-Atlantic, and it was Jerry helped me because Piper trusted no one.
Right.
I mean, he was in that Austin level, DTA, don't trust anybody. I'm not advocating you live your life that way, but if that's what it takes to row the boat, well, then have at it. Get in the water. So that was the situation there with those guys. Roddy just didn't trust anybody. I knew that if we were going to, I liked Roddy, and I thought Roddy could help us on a controlled basis. But we've got to get him signed, and we got to get this relationship on somewhat a trustworthy ground, as much as any veteran wrestler can trust the office.
Right.
And so Jerry Briscoe helped me come together with Roddy, and that helped build our relationship. And I never had any major issues with Roddy Piper. The guys want to know where am I going to work? You're going to fly in first class. You're going to put him in a good hotel. which everybody got to stay in. Good Hilton, Marriott, something name brand, not Joe's Inn, type thing. So I liked working with Roddy. He's smart and he kept you on your toes, and I thought that was kind of a nice little deal.
I tell you what I thought was a nice little deal. One last match for Road Warrior Hawk. It's Hawk and Animal in a losing effort here against Rob Van Dam and Kane. This is going to be Hawk's last appearance here in the WWE. It only lasts 3 minutes and 10 seconds, and Meltzer was not kind. Animal was blown up in 40 seconds. Hawk missed the Doomsday Device, and Kane choke slammed him, and RVD frog splashed him for the win. Bischoff said he had signed him for Raw, and at that point, neither had signed a contract, and there were no dates booked for them after Baltimore on the 12th. The Road Warriors looked terrible, but it was short enough that the crowd seemed okay with it. Hawk got right up after the finish, and there's been a long negative history of Hawk and Vince, but Vince told Hawk before the show, let's let bygones be bygones. What's the thinking here? Just take a look at them, see if there's anything there.
Yeah, or you could say this one. Leopards don't change their spots.
Yeah, there you go.
The Road Warriors had not approached the business any differently in this particular era than they did by and large when they first got in it. Ole Anderson coddled them. He took care of them, and I don't say that's a bad thing, but it gave them the false reality of what it really was. They're taking care of you now because you're young, you're getting over, and you're selling tickets. And when that ceases or starts slowing down, that trend is not the same trend it is today, then guess what? You'll be treated differently. So, and that's just how the nature of the damn business is. So they were still perceived in their own minds as this amazing tag team. And they were. I mean, the legacy of the Road Warriors is as prominent as any tag team in wrestling. Whether you love their style or you didn't, but they made an impact. They changed the way wrestling was perceived by a lot of people. But they still felt they were at that echelon, and they weren't. And they didn't want that. Was hard to accept. And then you add a little bit of drugs and alcohol into the mix, and what do you got? You got a calamity.
Yeah.
And a calamity not worth investing again in. And look, the interesting part, those guys could have made less money. They could have got back on TV as a special attraction, kind of like Andre back in the day. He just showed up every now and then, but it always meant something. And they could have done that. That could have increased their appearances and all their ancillary monies, but they just didn't. They didn't see it that way. And so they should have been attractions and reoccurring characters. If that had happened, then cool. But to be the tag champs and wrestle full time, because they couldn't hold up to wrestle full time. So that option was out the window. So it was just overthought by the talent, I think. And I had great times with the Road Warriors. When they're coming in for Cowboy, and I'd hang around with those guys, and then they worked with me, and in WCW and so forth. So but I always enjoyed the guys. They're like big high school seniors who are always pushing around the underclassmen because they're naturally bullies.
Right.
So what? At least you know what you got. And that's how they were booked. They were booked to be two bullies from Chicago who overpowered their opponents and generally beat them into submission, so to speak. So that was the situation there, Conrad. Just their time had come, and I don't know that I did a good job or Vince did a good job in sitting down with them and saying, here's where we are. Now, this is our opinion. Unfortunately, it's the opinion. And that is you guys will be making less money, working less dates, and still being able to keep your name and all that good stuff and get on this massive television vehicle. If you're great marketers and businessmen, you see that as an opportunity. You don't see it as a negative.
Right.
Unless you don't want to agree that your days are over. And trust me, their in-ring days are over.
Let's talk about Freddie Blassie. This go home episode of Raw before the big pay-per-view features Freddie Blassie coming out in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
He calls Eric Bischoff a stuttering prick in a backstage promo. 3-minute warning come out, and it's all a setup to bring the Dudleys back on TV. And it includes Freddie Blassie saying, "Devon, get the tables."
God bless you.
How special was this moment to
Oh.
Vince?
Oh, big time. And Vince loved Freddie. Jesus. Vince's dad loved Freddie.
Yeah,
Hell, we all love Freddie, Conrad. Did you ever meet Freddie?
I did not.
Well, that's you missed on one there, because he was, when we throw this legend shit around too freely, I think, in everything. He's a legendary receiver. He's been in the league 4 years. What?
Right.
So Freddie was a pioneer. I mean, Leroy McGurk told me stories about classy Freddie. He wasn't even classy then. He was just Freddie Blassie. And he had black hair. But he was talking about Freddie's psychology and how he was fearless. And I learned early on that if you're going to be a good heel, at least in that era, the territory era, you can't be afraid of heat.
Yeah.
And he wasn't afraid of nothing. And had a great career. Look at what he did with Andy Kaufman before Andy Kaufman did his thing with Lawler.
Right.
So I'm a major mark for Freddie Blassie. And my wife and his wife got along wonderfully. I don't know how they could understand each other very well, but Mrs. Blassie was she was beautiful. I mean, she was exactly what you would think of a royal beauty from Japan. She was absolutely pristine. Her clothing, her shoes, her hair, everything. And she took care of Freddie. I love Freddie. He'd come by the office in Stanford. My office was next to Vince's, so he's going to make a stop at Vince's office first, which I don't blame him. He's smart. And then he'd drop by my place, and we'd sit back and shoot the breeze in general things. And then I would always try to bring up somebody that he would have a common interest with McGurk back in that day, in the 50s. So Freddie was classic. And that was a great idea. Everything about that little angle that you just described, Connie, great idea. It worked. And it got the Dudleys immediately repositioned. And I think that was the object of the game. That's why we did the angle and used Freddie. I was just worried they're going to try to talk Freddie into taking a bump.
Well, I'm glad that didn't happen.
Me too.
What did happen is Goldberg beat Christian in a cage match in 6 minutes and 49 seconds. This is Goldberg's first match on TV. And Christian's going to bring out the People's Chair, which is the one The Rock dented up with Goldberg's skull. He's going to nail Goldberg with a 6-chair shot to the head and 7 more chair shots to the body. Christian goes for a spear, but he misses, goes into the cage, and he comes up all bloody. And then Goldberg throws him into the cage a few times, hits the spear and the jackhammer. And Meltzer says Goldberg wasn't nearly as over as much as people expected. Nobody to blame but themselves.
Well, why do we do it in a cage, and why do we do it with a very talented worker? Christian's a very talented worker. Yes. God, in my AEW home, we're so blessed to have talents like he and Jericho, guys that are, that you're going to get a good to great match out of every time out. So why take a talent? Because I can tell you why. The reason that we did this cage is hot shotting. And Christian wasn't over to give Goldberg that big win. And that's not Christian's fault. He's not booking. He's performing. So it was just a matter of, it's hot shot booking. And hot shot booking more often than not fails. In case you haven't noticed, folks, for you that have been following the business a long time, hot shot booking, sometimes you shoot an angle and it's a hot shot angle. It's over the top. A lot of blood, a lot of violence, a lot of this, that, and the other, which is somebody's thinking, well, I love that. Well, what if you had it every week? It's not special. It's not special anymore. So, but I think Goldberg got booked a little, what's that word I'm looking for? Kerfunkety. You ever hear Bruce say kerfunkety?
No, that's a new one on me.
Kerfunkety. It's kind of like awkward, cow on ice type thing. So, anyhow, but I think Meltzer was right. in as much as that Goldberg wasn't over in every market as much as we would have liked for him to be.
Right.
But that was the process of booking. That's why you do these TV shows. That's why you do these matches. But I thought doing a cage match and having so many chair shots and so much blood and gore was distracting to get Goldberg over. If
Right.
that makes any sense. But the star of the show became the gimmicks and not the match.
Man, learn something new every day here.
Well, thank you, Connie.
Yeah, listen, that's why we're here, man.
Let's go get a chopped beef sandwich.
I'm for it. How about we meet each other halfway?
Yeah, or the fuck would that be? Oh Lord,
what would that be? Mississippi, maybe?
I don't know.
Piper's Pit is going to see Piper start yelling at a fan, waving a U.S. flag, and Sean O'Haire is going to throw the kid, aka Zach Gowen, into the ring. Piper accidentally pulls his prosthetic leg off. Mr. America runs in for the save, and the two leave together. Vince was mad at Piper, claiming the kid would probably file a lawsuit against the company. And then he said that Piper has a black heart and he wants him to face Mr. America. So here we go. Zach Gallen in the middle of Piper's Pit, Mr. America. I mean, listen, it's a pretty cool moment for Zach Gallen, who grew up a lifelong fan, and now he finds himself in an angle with Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan.
And look, let's not delete also the fact he had wrestling training.
Yes.
He had worked.
Yes.
And I'm not telling you he was a Jack Briscoe level, but he could take a flat back, and he knew how to sell. And he had that amazing handicap that he tried to maximize, tried to turn it into a positive, which I admire him for that. But he took a hell of an ass whipping. I'll tell you that right now. He mastered. It's like the Mulkeys. They figured out how to get over, and that was to get beat by like a rag doll, government mule, if you will. And Zach got that down. He was good at it.
Pulling the prosthetic leg off. What a visual, right? I mean,
yeah, we did it once before with Kevin Nash and Maurice Mad Dog Vachon in Omaha.
Yes.
So, but yeah, it's shocking. No matter when you don't do it that often because there's not that many candidates.
Yeah, it wouldn't be special. It's like you were saying about cage matches and blood. It wouldn't be special if you did it every week.
Nope.
Mysterio was backstage saying he's not sure how long he's got left in his career. It might be over. And then Big Show attacks him, carries him into the ring. He's doing a number on him. And then Lesnar makes the save and hits an F5 on Big Show. This is all to set up a stretcher match at the pay-per-view. Was Big Show the right person to be Brock's first challenger after Kurt?
Well, he had a lot of TV time. And you have this near 300-pound baby face in Brock Lesnar.
Right.
You got to create a visual for me that puts the 300-pounder in jeopardy. So how do you do that? Well, one way you can do it is to have him outsized, have him out-hossed. And Show was probably 400 pounds at that time, much bigger than Brock. So I for those reasons, I don't have an issue with it, quite frankly. It was going to be a quality win and one that was important for Brock's growth.
Let's talk a little bit about the way the show was received by fans. The O2 Judgment Day, headlined by Hulk Hogan and The Undertaker from Nashville for the undisputed title, had 373,000 buys. This one has 315,000 buys. Considering the overall business and how it's down 30%, that's got to be considered a win.
Yeah, a little encouraging.
Yes.
A little ray of hope. And Lord knows we were looking for rays of hope during that era with all these changes on the roster, the unavailabilities of stars that can't be replaced, but are still vivid in the memories and the mind of the fans. It brings up an interesting question. I kind of alluded to it back when I was talking about Goldberg and Austin. Was Goldberg simply a reminder that Austin's not here anymore?
Yeah.
And more clearly with the goatee, the bald head, jacked up, intensity. And if that's the case, was that a good thing? I don't know how you get around it. Quite frankly, Conrad, I don't know what the solution might be. But doggone, man, I don't need a reminder to every turn in the road. It's like having on the entranceway having Austin pictures or posters or whatever, or the camera guys shooting the Austin 316 T-shirts in the crowd. There are plenty of them. They're still selling. They're still selling today. So it was you kind of found yourself between a rock and a hard spot there. This association by the visual association was you couldn't escape it, quite frankly.
Let's get to the show here. The readers of the Wrestling Observer gave it 77% thumbs down. Meltzer would say worse than the match quality on the show, which was bad, was the new concept of pay-per-view. Instead of basing the show around strong matches, they're now following the TV direction. Since most of the pushed commodities on TV either don't wrestle or shouldn't wrestle very long, there was far more emphasis on Raw-like skits. We had a show-long sketch with Austin and Bischoff in the luxury box, leading to Austin getting Bischoff drunk on beer and him hurling all over a waitress and theoretically on the crowd. Boy, if that wasn't a metaphor for current wrestling. The vomit sketch was said to be Vince's idea. Kevin Dunn was a major proponent for more backstage and more sketches and less wrestling, and in particular, the need for more Austin on the show. This is an interesting shift because that is kind of the way WWE had been for a long time. Lots of story, lots of gaga on TV, and then we set up big time matches to blow them off on the pay-per-view. But now Hogan's not really wrestling all the time, and certainly Piper's not wrestling all the time, and Austin's not wrestling at all, and Bischoff's a big character, but not really a wrestler.
All
so
right.
if you're going to bring that same star power to the pay-per-view, I guess necessity is the mother of invention. You have to get creative and do more sketches, right?
I guess you do. That's where we went. I thought we overkilled it.
Yeah.
I think you watered down the sketches. I think you watered down the vignettes when you have so many of them, and especially some of them. Something's got to take precedent. Some vignettes got to be more important than the previous one or the next one or whatever. When you're doing something with Austin, that's the most important vignette you're going to do on that show. So plan for that, time-wise, et cetera, et cetera. So, something's going to suffer. And I, of course, hired most of these guys. So I had strong beliefs that we had the wrestling roster to entertain the audience with wrestling and brawling and fighting and violence, aggression, whatever. We had the tools in our toolbox. We decided not to open the toolbox on that particular day and talk. And everybody can't talk. It's not all stimulating. And you got to remember, these guys this is right before everybody was trying to learn their lines. And that's a recipe for disaster. Learning your lines, my ass. He's like, these guys are actors. They may be in general theory, but they're not trained thespians. So why do we expect it to be overwhelmingly good? And now we're going to cut out more of our show for that than not. But that's what the boss wanted. He wanted more soap opera. Kevin Dunn was very influential, as he should be as the executive producer, for God's sakes. So anyhow, it was interesting times. I know as an announcer, we never, one thing you look for as an announcer is to find your rhythm. And I wouldn't expect, if I was going to do something in London, that my first foray would be as strong as my last appearance on that show. You got to get better. You got to grow. You got to increase it. And so it was just hard. It was hard to find that rhythm because we're starting and stopping and starting and stopping, and it's a detriment.
Let's get to the show here. We got 13,000 folks. The Coliseum actually holds 23,000, so a lot is blocked off. There's a change before we get here. Chavo Guerrero was hurt at the SmackDown show right before the pay-per-view, and that's going to make a change in the ladder match, and it effectively kills the Los Guerreros babyface run that was planned. Man, just bad timing for Chavo. I love the Los Guerreros. This could have been an even bigger opportunity for Chavo, but timing's everything, man.
Yeah, bad luck. It's bad
Yeah.
luck, and that's all that was. Because you're right, uh, they had something together, no doubt. Oh, look, Eddie's at, no matter how cynical one may be, and admitting that wrestling is very opinionated. It's very subjective. Eddie's in that era. Eddie was on fire because he's doing a favor to help a family member, Chavo, get recognized, and his nephew, to get a break. Eddie was going to be able to help facilitate a major break for Chavo because eventually you're going to figure out, well, they're going to have a nice run as a babyface team, then they're going to implode, and Chavo is going to be the babyface. At least that's one way of thinking about it. But they had a great upside, and of course it's just so unfortunate, bad timing for Chavo. Felt bad for those guys.
Let's talk a little bit about the first match. I guess we should mention before we do, the show opens with Steve Austin because of course it does. And he lets everybody know he's going to be watching from the luxury boxes. And then it's time for our first match, which feels like something out of a fever dream. It's only 4 minutes long, but check out this team. Johnny Stamboli, Chuck Palumbo, and John Cena are going to make a team here to take on Chris Benoit, Rhino, and Spanky. I mean, we all love Brian Kendrick. I think the world of Rhino. We know what a great performer Chris Benoit was before we learned the rest of the story. But the team of John Cena, Chuck Palumbo, and Johnny Stamboli, I would have never in a million years remembered that was a 6-man on pay-per-view.
Me neither. It was just to get Cena booked, get Cena on the show.
Right.
I mean, no, it wasn't a mystery as to who the star of that entire match was going to eventually be.
Right.
It's just a matter of how do we get there, and what kind of consistent route can we take to build John as we went along, because you knew he was going to outwork anybody on the card as far as being in shape, being present and on time, all those things that we take for granted sometimes, and we shouldn't. That was one of the greatest things that Cena brought to the table, was the example of how to be a tremendous pro. And there's no doubt in my mind, John Cena is one of the greatest pros that I've ever worked with. And next year will be 50 years for me in this crazy shit.
We should mention that Spanky takes a pretty stiff kick here from Stamboli. He winds up with a cut under his eye, but that's not the trouble. He suffers a concussion, and he tries to shake it off in the ring, but when he gets backstage, he gets dizzy and numb and winds up being stretchered to the hospital and spends the night there.
Yeah.
This is scary, and a reminder that it's not just these big crazy stunts off of ladders. Just a regular old wrestling match is dangerous business
from people that aren't skilled yet, Connie.
Right.
I mean, I don't have a axe to grind with Johnny Stamboli or anybody else, but maybe he was in an environment that he wasn't quite ready for prime time. And I'm with you. A basic kick became disastrous and could have been really bad. And I'm glad Brian's working back with WWE. He's a good kid. Somebody said he had a lot to do with the what's that comedian's the guy in Puerto Rico?
The Bad Bunny, you mean?
Yeah, Bad Bunny. I'm sorry. He's really good, by the way. He's very good for what his experience level. But I heard that Brian Kendrick was involved in the training of Bad Bunny. And if that is true, I don't know if it is or not, then he did a hell of a job. Somebody did a hell of a job.
No doubt. No doubt. Let's talk about the next match here. It's La Resistance. They're going to actually pick up a win over Scott Steiner and Test. They go 6 minutes and 19 seconds. Meltzer would say by the end, poor Sylvain was totally lost. Star and a quarter. Maybe these guys weren't ready for prime time, like you were saying in the first one, huh?
They weren't. Good kids. Long-term upside, but we're not long-term right now. We're just rattling right out of the box. They got nice tights. They got nice knee pads. They're all color coordinated. They look like a team. They look like a unit. They just weren't ready. And again, that's not an indictment on those guys.
Right.
They can't help it because they're young, but they need to be in a territory or a camp and they need to work more, and they need to work more with people that were better than them, and they just got pushed too quick, and that is a Patterson influence. Hey, nobody respected Pat more than me, maybe Bruce, because they worked together so closely. I learned a lot from Pat, and I never had too many cross words with him, just philosophically. And that's no big deal. That's like sounding like left-handed pitchers better than right-handed pitchers. It don't make a shit. Give me the outs, get the wins, and we're okay. So they just weren't ready, Connie. And you can see the trend. We're trying to get new people on television with the hopes that something's going to stick, with the hopes that somebody's going to say, "Oh, wait, they like that guy, or they like that girl." So that's where we were, experimenting, and some of the experiments were successful, and most, unfortunately, weren't.
Well, we got another great match coming. It's going to be Eddie Guerrero and Tajiri teaming up to take on Team Angle. That's Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin. I absolutely loved them as a tag team. And man, I had so much fun watching Tajiri over the years. They get plenty of time to here, 14 minutes and 18 seconds. And Meltzer would say this match would have been better as just a regular match because Tajiri and Team Angle had never worked with ladders before, and it came off as an indie version of a ladder match. Guerrero was the star of the night. He did a frog splash from nearly the top of an 8-foot ladder and later did a sunset flip powerbomb over the ladder on Haas. The finish would see Guerrero and Benjamin both climbing the ladder at the same time, and Tajiri climbed up underneath Guerrero, blew mist in Benjamin's eyes, and allowed Guerrero to get the belts. 3 stars. Man, this is fun to watch for me, but it is hard to think about when we just had this, guys. We got to stop with all the stunts. We got 3 guys who've never been in a ladder match working a ladder match.
Yeah, I don't know that anybody was fully aware of that.
Right.
I wasn't. Because I looked at Eddie Guerrero as Superman. Eddie Guerrero could be great in any environment, any match, any stipulation. And again, he was the star of the match, as you had described.
Right.
So I love that match. It was so much fun. And I'm a big Tajiri mark. I just thought he was his facial expressions were just at the top of the list. So he had great facials. He laid his stuff in. What he did was believable and it seemed to be real to me. So I was a big fan of Tajiri. So when we lost him, it was a loss because he always delivered. He always delivered. And he was so much fun to be around. Great sense of humor, great comedic timing. You know, some of those bits and some of those facials he come up with, boom, just like that, were pieces of, cinematic art, shall we say.
We should also mention that we're bringing back the Intercontinental title with that battle royal we talked about. It comes up next. It's match number 4 on the pay-per-view. 11 minutes and 38 seconds. Sean Morley is going to come out as Val Venus. So he's doing his old shtick. Everyone except Booker T, Christian, Jericho, and Goldust were eliminated in the first 2 minutes. Meltzer would say, in a cool spot, Jericho went for the lion salt on Booker when Christian surprised him and caught him and Jericho and tossed him over in 8:19. Christian then drop kicked the referee for the ref bump. And Booker is going to sidekick Christian over the top. This is where it got stupid. Christian went over the top, the bell rang, and Booker's music played. Then they showed the replay on Raw the next night, and they edited out the bell ringing when Christian went over. Christian then grabbed the belt from Pat Patterson, who was there to present it to the winner, and he decked Patterson and gave Booker a belt shot and threw him over. Referee Patton saw and then raised Christian's hand, 1.25 stars. So a little silly here.
Bad execution, Conrad. That's simple to cut to the chase.
Yes.
They fucking shit the bed. And the match was laid out. This is what we're going to do. I mean, it turned me off the first 2 minutes because all these stars are going. I didn't understand that. So the story never had a chance to elongate and to articulate, as Hank Stram would say at a Super Bowl. So, it just is laid out bad. And I don't know who laid it out. It doesn't matter. It's not going to, I don't want to mention names anyway in that respect of negativity to any overextended degree, but it was laid out bad.
Right.
It's laid out bad, and let's not talking about the winner. Who's the that's pardon me. That's irrelevant. You're talking about execution, and a lot of talented guys doo-dooed on the sheets in that one.
Right. Doo-dooed on the sheets is a new shirt available now at Grilling JR Shirts. Not really. Hey, so the bikini contest is next, and it's supposed to be judged by the fans. Wow, this is pretty roll tide, I reckon. But there's Sable doing her thing.
YouTube, baby.
And go check out YouTube for this. Tori Wilson is her opponent. I mean, I don't know really what we're doing, but Jerry Lawler almost passed out. And
look at Lawler's got that little Superman curl like he does Clark Kent thing. You notice that? That's just homage to Superman. That's the way he combed his hair every TV.
I love
had to have the Superman curl, and we've got to get him healthy.
It's interesting because the fans were supposed to decide who wins, and Taz is going to ask, who they think wins.
Mm-hmm.
And Sable gets a moderate pop, and Tori Wilson gets a slightly lesser pop, but a lot of boos, and she's supposed to win, and she's the face. But either way, if you're looking for scantily clad ladies right in the middle of your wrestling show, we got it.
Who won? Did Sable win?
I think we won, Jim.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right.
I think we won.
I'm glad Taz wears shades.
Yeah.
It was bright in there, man, that night.
Next up, match number 5. This is real. This happened in 2003. Mr. America, a.k.a. Hulk Hogan, is going to wrestle Roddy Piper here. They go about 5 minutes. Meltzer would say, well, Hogan can say that in the end, he got to pin Piper in the WWE. Being that it was Charlotte, Hogan did get noticeable boos, and his pop wasn't nearly what it would have been almost anywhere else, but he still got far more cheers. Piper actually wore the t-shirt listing the names of the dead wrestlers on his back. They were very careful not to shoot the back of it on TV. Sean O'Hare keeps interfering. Piper's going to jump off the apron with a double sledge, and crowd's pretty dead except for the easy spots like the 10 count or the punches in the corner or wiggling the hand while caught in a sleeper. It was more like a cartoon match, according to Dave Meltzer. Hulk is going to Hulk up, and Vince comes out. He gives O'Hare a pipe. O'Hare goes to hit Hogan, but instead hits Piper, and Hogan does the leg drop. Zach Gowen, who Hogan had brought out at the start of the match, then tackled Vince as he tries to interfere in the pin. It gets a dud rating, but listen, what did we expect here? This is going to be lots of gaga, lots of fun, old school nostalgia stuff. As a fan in 03, I liked this. It was fun.
It was a gimmick.
Yes.
It was not too long. I didn't think it. 5 minutes. I'm pretty down with about anything for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a nice spot in the show. It might have been what some would say is Vince's "let me up" match.
Yes.
And that, of course, remains to be seen as we go through the rest of the show, which we're getting toward the end. But yeah, it was. I thought it was well booked. Everybody's got to get their stuff in. Everybody's paranoid. Jesus Christ! And the older one gets, the more paranoid they seemingly become. And of course, then you got two of the greats of all time in that mental game, in Hogan and Piper. They knew how to play it. They knew how to protect themselves, and so they understood the art of pro wrestling. Quite frankly, that's simple. And that is in itself brings with it some paranoia and some doubt, some skepticism, and things of that nature.
Let's talk about match 6 here. It's Kevin Nash beating Triple H by DQ. So Triple H is going to retain the title here in 7 minutes and 52 seconds. Of course, Ric Flair's here and we're in Charlotte, so he's going to get a huge pop when he comes out. Maybe the biggest on the show. But it's a DQ finish. So Triple H is going to use a pedigree. It doesn't work. And he's going to go for the sledgehammer. The referee, Earl Hebner, is going to try to stop him. Triple H is going to hit Hebner with it. And when he's taking the bump, Hebner winds up injuring his shoulder. And that gets the DQ. After the match, Nash hits the snake eyes on Triple H and exposes the metal turnbuckle. and then drags him to the announcer's position and power bombs him through the table. It gets a dud rating, but man, they were trying. I mean, a power bomb through the table. I remember that spot, and as a fan, I dug it. Meltzer did not. What'd you think?
Oh, I have a much higher opinion of the match than Dave does.
Yes.
Which doesn't make me right and him wrong, or vice versa.
Right.
I thought the effort, Meltzer seldom puts a lot in his match descriptions about effort, hustle, physicality, things of that nature. There's always got to be the political undertones. Or maybe they made a mistake hiring Nash. His days are over, or whatever. Why they do a DQ? If you want to get Nash over, why wouldn't you just switch the belt type thing? Well, there's a lot of reasons you wouldn't do that, but I thought the sledgehammer being utilized gave the referee no outs.
Right.
You got to disqualify him. So that's kind of how I saw that, Connie. It's just the DQ was a necessary evil. I don't like them, but sometimes that's where you are. So if you don't want to change the title, if I was booking a house show card, I put that match on it, I would know the finish I would like to have when it left my pencil. You gotta be thinking outcomes as well as it's just not just a match. What are we going to do in it? Because you got to talk to the agent. He's got to talk to talent. Then you usually if it's a controversial thing, you got to get on the phone with the talent and convince them that your judgment is accurate and to give it a try. I remember talking to Kevin Nash one time about a match he had. I think it was a triple threat match, and at a pay-per-view, and I think he's putting over Brett. Brett was one of the three guys, and Kevin and I had a long philosophical discussion about a small package. I said, you want something fast, visual, that don't hurt you, don't hurt him, and it's a 1, 2, 3. Maybe it's a little speeded up count or not. And so I said that I don't remember what the show was, but you go back and find it, and you'll see that finish, small package, inside cradle. It's a wrestling hold. It's why I was so enamored with the fact that Lesnar lost with a wrestling hold the other night in Puerto Rico. So wrestling's not dead. It's more powerful than it's ever been. Hence London and other places for ticket sales for all kinds of organizations.
Next up, another Let Me Up match. Jazz is going to retain the women's title in a 4-way over Jacqueline, Trish Stratus, and Victoria. It only goes 4 minutes and 48 seconds. Stratus winds up with a bloody lip when it's all done, but it takes a DDT, and that's it for Jacqueline. Gets a star in 3/4. Kind of the death spot for the ladies between the two big title matches, but
yeah,
that's where we were at the time. And the main event is here. Brock Lesnar is the man, fresh off of WrestleMania. He is got the big belt, and he's got an even bigger opponent in the Big Show. It's a stretcher match for the SmackDown title. It gets 3 1/4 stars. They do lots of gaga here, though, because Lesnar is going to come out with a forklift somewhere in all of this. Rey Mysterio does a magic act and disappears. There's a vertical suplex, and it gets a huge pop, as you might imagine, and then an F5. And then Lesnar rolls him onto the forklift and carries him to the back. A forklift for Big Show. It's fun. It's silly. I like it, though.
Yeah, it kind of was almost a let me up main event.
It is.
I mean, they didn't have double juice and all kinds of violence. Creatively laid out. I assume that Patterson had something to do with that because it was very well done. Even in a unique landscape, they connected the dots. So I liked it. And back on the ladies' match, that match represented everything I wanted to kill in WWE when I was in charge of booking and talent relations, etc. It's not where I wanted to go. I wanted to give that brand, that gender, respect. And I believe that highly skilled, highly motivated, attractive females, athletic females, were an asset. To give them a thank you for coming, cup of coffee in 4 minutes, ain't my idea of doing that. And you said, well, what would you do? Well, I would give more time. That's the first thing. I'd give more time. I don't know that there's a lot you can do, Conrad, about putting the match in another spot. It kind of ended up being born in for this book for this. So I don't know. I despise that because it worked so hard and they made the house shows. When these go back and look at some reports about the house show performances with the ladies. Very, very rarely was there ever any disappointment, even from the cynical agents.
Yes.
Who didn't like the broads on the card. So, we fight those battles all the time from guys you like and you have a lot of respect for, but fellas, we got to move away from this broad shit. Oh, those damn broads are here. We got to get a dressing room for them, and shut up. Yeah, they need a dressing room. They need a shower. They need a toilet that works. God, I'm sorry, I'm pampering them. So, yeah, I wanted that. There was money there, and that theory, Conrad, has been proven out.
Yes.
Hence Charlotte's success, her earnings, and so forth. All those women became stars. Becky is one of our girls, and so I think that that just pissed me off, and they deserve better. And I'll close with that.
They do deserve better, and you deserve better. You deserve a little BBQ from jrsbbq.com.
Yeah, baby.
And you want to talk about the best sauces in the world? I've bragged a bunch here about the all-purpose seasoning, but they got the main event mustard, the Chipotle ketchup, something for everybody. Least of all, the brand new product, Red SJR hot sauce. Come on, man!
Come on, baby!
Right now,
yeah. I mean, as I said, I'm in Oklahoma, obviously, in my little office here. Some sort of a snapshot of some of my memorabilia, including Danny Hodge right behind my head. No, where is he's over there? It's a cauliflower alley cove deal. But Mickey Mantle signed jersey and bat. John Wayne signed merch. So I'm a mark for some of my heroes. That's why I don't agree with that situation. Never want to meet your hero. Okay, why, you negative bastard? You never want to meet your heroes. They'll disappoint you every time. Just like those broads. Jesus. You live your life this way?
Right.
Seriously, man. Oh, you're divorced. You're alone. That describes me. Wait a minute. Hold on. There's exceptions to the rule. Some of us alone guys are happy. So anyhow, I don't know where I was before I started. Oh, the barbecue. So I'm going to sign a bunch of stuff while I'm here. We're awaiting the arrival of our action figures, which will be sold, signed. And so that's going to be kind of cool. So I'm looking forward to that. But it's a season, baby. It's a season. And it's always a season.
Yeah,
so check it out, jrsbbq.com. The store never closes. We ship every day. So you ain't going to wait forever to get your stuff. And we're going to take care of you. If there's ever anything wrong, there's a thing on our website where you hit us. We'll make it right, bottom line. So we don't have many of those problems because we take pain and time and packaging. So anyhow, it's great taste. Mama had a hand in it. Jan had a hand in it. And I'm maintaining it as best I can in their spirit. So jrsbbq.com, check it out. Hey, try a bottle.
Yes.
Try a bottle. Try some all-purpose seasoning. It's going to last you unless you're like Conrad, you go through a bottle a month.
It's good on everything, Jim. I love it on everything. I think it's my favorite on chicken, though. Yeah. I mean, it sets chicken off. Go check it out, jrsbbq.com. By the way, if you're in Baltimore, check out Jim Ross this weekend. That's right. On Sunday, he's going to be at the Baltimore Celeb Fest with the fabulous Freebirds and Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Devon Dudley and Dan Housen and Ultimo Dragon, so much more. It's all happening at BaltimoreCelebFest.com. That's BaltimoreCelebFest.com. And in a couple of weeks, you get your chance to get whatever you want signed by the voice of wrestling. It's a virtual signing on Sunday, June 4th, KNS WrestleFest. You can find it on Facebook.com/KS WrestleFest. That's Facebook.com Facebook.com/KS WrestleFest. They've got photos, they've got figures, they've got trading cards, they've even got barbecue sauce bottles, and you can even mail in your own items. All the information is at Facebook.com/KS WrestleFest. August 4th, you know what's going down. It's the Gathering in Charlotte. And man, it's a who's who. It's Kurt Angle. It's Kevin Nash. It's Abdullah the Butcher. It's Tully Blanchard. It's Doink. It's JJ Dillon. It's Gerald Briscoe. It's Greg Gagne. And least of all, come on now, the voice of wrestling. Are you kidding? TeamArtPromotions.com has all your info. Check it out. Man, you're back on tour, back on the road. And of course, every Friday night we can hear you.
I'm feeling better, man. I'm feeling better. And Rampage is better. Tony Khan is booking more attractive matches, at least in my view. Some real good matchups. And I tried to, the one thing that I've talked to these young guys about that are on Rampage. This is an opportunity for all this TV time on national television. This ain't some rum-dum, channel 107. It's a legitimately visited, attended network. NBA's on it, NHL's on it,
right? It's a big
Rampage is on it.
Yes,
right.
Yes.
So anyhow, I'm excited. I think I'm feeling so much better. It's giving me the motivation to go out. I'm not going to do a lot of appearances, but so if you get a chance to come see me, I'd love to see you. I'm going to talk to you like I'm talking to you right now, so I ain't changing. Just so you're pre-warned, like Conrad's disclaimer last week on our podcast about the atrocities at times in the early days of my career. So anyhow, it's I'm feeling better, man. That's the good news.
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, the good news, I'm feeling better, and I'm going to make some appearances. I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere down the road, old Conrad and I don't hit the stage again and do some Q&As and
we're going to do it.
Stories.
You know it.
Yeah, why not? Hey, I liked the one we did in. Were you and I together? Was that? Oh, it's Lawler, but you were there in Nashville when we had that chicken.
Yeah, that was a good time.
Hattie's chicken. Is that what?
Yeah, Hattie B's.
Oh shit!
The hot chicken, man.
You couldn't sit still and eat it.
Boys and girls, thank you so much for tuning in. We greatly appreciate your support. Check us out on YouTube. It's Grilling JR on YouTube.com. That's Grilling JR on YouTube.com. Love to have your interaction on social. It's at JR Grilling on Twitter and Instagram, Grilling JR over on Facebook. Of course, JR is very active on Twitter. It's at JR's BBQ, which is also where you can find all of his fine offerings, jrsbbq.com. Plus, tons of great new merch over at grillingjrtees.com. Including the now infamous "Where's My Push, Damn It" t-shirt. Grillingjrtees.com is where you need to be. And if your business targets men 25 to 54 years old, why not advertise with us, man? We got a super targeted audience. You hear the same ads over and over, and you want to know why? Because they
work.
Advertisewithjr.com is the place to go. Advertisewithjr.com. Should give a free plug here for adfreeshows.com as well. Not only do you get the shows early and ad-free, you can be a part of our live studio audience. I want to thank everybody for turning up and turning out for us today. Lindsay and Eddie Prather and Bobby and the whole crew, Jeremy and Coach Rosie. And we had a packed house today with Domino Chris and Eric Green and Keith Morrison. Appreciate all you guys very much.
Keith Morrison from Dateline? Wow.
That's him. By the way, we also have uploaded a ton. I mean, like 50 different episodes of Jim's old WSB radio shows where he would interview the likes of Jesse Ventura or Rick Rude or Cactus Jack or Tony Schiavone. It's almost like a time capsule because back then, boy, the days of kayfabe were real. Yeah. So you're going to hear a lot of in-character interviews that you just can't get these days. I think you're going to dig it. Why not try it for free? We're doing a free trial right now. Your first week is on me at adfreeshows.com. I don't know what I expected today, Jim, but this was a great show, and I'm looking forward to next week because we got a hell of a topic. We're going to be talking about Brian Pillman. From his days with you in WCW's Flying Brian to coming into the World Wrestling Federation. We'll cover it all, soup to nuts, next week. Flying Brian here on Grilling JR. This should be fun.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about with good old Brian. I love that kid like a little brother, and we'll talk about that relationship because the story about JR and Grilling JR and Brian Pillman is more about the friendship than that one match he had. He did a Guadalupe
Yes.
a burrito tope. No, with side of guac.
Oh, the Guadalupe Burrito Tope shirt available now. GrillingJRT.com. Jim, this was so much fun. Can't wait for next week. Be sure to catch Jim this Friday night on Rampage. And if you're in Baltimore, go see him. BaltimoreCelebFest.com. We'll see you next week right here on Grilling JR with the voice of wrestling, Mr. Jim Ross.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. We sure appreciate you.